Marcus Chin stared at the for rent sign swaying in the autumn breeze, its metal chain creaking against the weathered storefront. The building sat at the corner of Maple Street and Cemetery Road, directly across from Willowbrook Memorial Gardens where hundreds of weathered headstones dotted the rolling hills like silent sentinels. Why would anyone want to open a business next to a graveyard? His wife Elena had asked him 3 weeks ago, her voice tinged with concern as she studied the rental listing on his laptop screen. It was a fair question, one that had haunted Marcus ever since he'd first seen the property. The rent was suspiciously cheap, even for their small town of Millbrook. The previous tenant, a flower shop, had lasted only 8 months before closing. Before that, a cafe had tried and failed within a year. Local gossip suggested the location was cursed, that the proximity to the dead made people uncomfortable. But Marcus saw something else entirely. He saw opportunity. Standing there now with the keys in his hand, watching an elderly woman place fresh chrysanthemums on a nearby grave, Marcus understood what others had missed. People came here every day, grieving families, devoted spouses, children honoring their parents. They came dressed in their finest clothes for funerals, in casual wear for regular visits, and sometimes in clothes that had seen better days because grief didn't wait for laundry day. And sometimes, Marcus realized, they needed a tailor. The brass bell above the door chimed as Marcus hung his sign, "Chen's Custom Tailoring Alterations While You Wait." Through the large front window, he had an unobstructed view of the cemetery's main entrance. Elena had helped him arrange the shop the night before, pressing tables along the walls, the vintage Singer sewing machine his grandmother had given him positioned prominently near the window, and bolts of fabric organized by color and weight. "It feels peaceful," Elena had admitted, surprising herself as she straightened a rack of measuring tapes. "I thought it would be creepy, but it's actually quite serene." The first customer arrived at 9:23 a.m., just 23 minutes after Marcus had flipped the open sign. She was a woman in her 70s with silver hair and kind eyes, wearing a black dress that hung loose around her diminished frame. "Excuse me," she said hesitantly, peering through the door. "Are you really open?" "Absolutely. I'm Marcus Chen. How can I help you?" She stepped inside, clutching a small purse. "I'm Dorothy Hartwell. Well, this is embarrassing. I'm here for my husband's memorial service this afternoon, and this dress." She gestured to the loose fabric around her waist. "I bought it last year when I was heavier. The cancer treatment, you know. I've lost so much weight, and I look terrible in it. Everyone will be looking at me, expecting me to be strong, and I just feel swallowed up." Marcus studied the dress with a professional eye. "I can have this fitted perfectly in an hour. Would you like to sit and have some tea while I work?" Dorothy's eyes filled with tears. "You would do that? Today?" "Mrs. Hartwell, today is exactly when you need to look and feel your best. Let me help you honor your husband properly." As Marcus worked, Dorothy told him about Harold, 52 years of marriage, how he'd loved her cooking, how he'd built birdhouses in their garage and donated them to the local elementary school. She talked, and Marcus listened, his hand steady as he pinned and stitched. When Dorothy left an hour later, the dress fit like it had been made for her. She walked taller, her shoulders back, ready to say goodbye to the love of her life. "Thank you," she whispered at the door. "You don't know what you've done for me today." But Marcus was beginning to understand exactly what he'd done. 3 days later, Father Miguel Santos knocked on the shop door. Marcus recognized him from St. Catherine's Catholic Church, though they'd never formally met. The priest was a large man with gentle eyes and calloused hands that spoke of a life before the cloth. "Mr. Chen? I hope you don't mind the interruption. I'm Father Santos from St. Catherine's." "Of course, Father. Please, come in. I heard about what you did for Dorothy Hartwell. Word travels fast in a small town, especially about kindness." Father Santos shifted uncomfortably. "I have a rather unusual request. I perform a lot of funeral services, and I've noticed, well, sometimes families can't afford proper funeral attire. They want to honor their loved ones, but money is tight. I was wondering if you might consider doing some pro bono work occasionally?" I could help coordinate with families who need it. Marcus didn't hesitate. Of course. But I'd like to keep it discreet. No one should feel like charity. Exactly what I was hoping you'd say. Father Santos smiled. There's something else. I have 5 black suits that I wear for services, but they're all getting a bit worn. Could you help refresh them? I can pay your regular rates. As Marcus measured the priest, Father Santos shared stories from his 20 years of ministry. He'd been a construction worker before his calling, had traveled to Haiti for mission work, and had officiated at over 1,000 funerals. You know what I've learned? Father Santos said as Marcus marked the hem of his pants. Death brings out both the worst and the best in people. But mostly the best. People want to do right by each other, especially at the end. What you're doing here, it's part of that. You're helping people honor their loved ones with dignity. 2 weeks into October, Rebecca Martinez walked into the shop carrying a garment bag and wearing an expression of barely controlled frustration. I need help, she announced without preamble. My mother died 4 days ago, and the funeral is tomorrow. I brought her favorite dress, the one she wanted to be buried in, but it's too big now. She lost so much weight in the hospital those last months. Rebecca unzipped the garment bag to reveal a beautiful navy blue dress with delicate pearl buttons and subtle embroidery along the collar. It was clearly expensive and well-made, probably from the 1980s when Rebecca's mother had been younger and fuller-figured. She was so specific about this dress, Rebecca continued, her voice cracking slightly. She told me 3 times to make sure this was the one. But look at it, it's going to hang on her like a tent. The funeral director said they could pin it from behind, but you'll still be able to tell. Mom was always so particular about how she looked. She would hate this. Marcus examined the dress carefully. Altering clothing for the deceased required different considerations than regular tailoring, no fittings, no second chances, and an understanding that the work was as much about the family's peace of mind as anything else. I can make this work, Marcus said finally. But I'll need her measurements, and I'll need to work through the night. The funeral home can give you measurements. And I'll pay whatever you need for the rush job. Marcus worked until 3 a.m., carefully taking in the seams, adjusting the shoulders, and ensuring every line of the dress would fall naturally. He thought about Rebecca's mother, a woman he'd never met but who had loved this dress enough to choose it for eternity. The next afternoon, Rebecca returned with red-rimmed eyes but a genuine smile. She looked perfect, she whispered. Exactly like herself. Thank you for giving me that. As autumn deepened into winter, Marcus noticed patterns in his customer base. There were the regular cemetery visitors, people who came weekly or monthly to tend graves and often needed small alterations or repairs. There was Mrs. Chen, no relation, who visited her late husband every Thursday and always wore the same blue coat that had developed a loose button. There was teenage Amy Rodriguez, who came with her grandmother to visit her parents' grave and had outgrown her only black dress for memorial masses. But there were also unexpected customers drawn by word of mouth. The cemetery groundskeeper, Tom Brady, brought in work uniforms that needed reinforcing. The florist from the shop next to the funeral home came by with dresses that needed hemming. Even people with no connection to the cemetery started stopping by, attracted by Marcus's reputation for quality work and fair prices. Elena began helping in the shop on weekends, and she proved to have a natural talent for working with bereaved customers. She understood when to speak and when to simply listen, when to offer tea and when to give people space to process their emotions. You know what I love about this place? Elena said one Saturday afternoon as she pressed a black suit for a funeral the next day. People come here at their most vulnerable moments, and we get to help them feel strong again. There's something sacred about that. Marcus nodded, watching through the window as an older man placed a small American flag by a headstone marked with military honors. I never expected that when I chose this location. I thought I was just getting cheap rent. December brought an unexpected challenge. Mrs. Patricia Wolfe, president of the Millbrook Historical Society, marched into the shop with the bearing of someone accustomed to getting her way. Mr. Chen, I need your help with a delicate situation. The Historical Society sponsors the annual Christmas memorial service at the cemetery. It's for people who have lost loved ones during the year. We provide a special choir, readings, candles. It's quite beautiful. That sounds wonderful. The challenge is that many attendees are struggling financially. This year especially, with the economic downturn. People want to come, want to honor their family members, but they don't have appropriate winter clothing. Dark, formal attire suitable for an outdoor evening service. I was wondering if you might consider partnering with us to help outfit families in need? Marcus looked at Elena, who nodded encouragingly. What did you have in mind? We have a discretionary fund. If you could provide services at cost, we could cover the materials and basic labor. Completely confidential, of course. Families would be told their items are being cleaned and pressed as a courtesy. Marcus spent the week before the memorial service working 12-hour days. He altered coats that had belonged to deceased family members so living relatives could wear them. He let out waistbands for people whose grief had affected their appetite in different ways. He reinforced buttons and fixed zippers and hemmed pants. The night of the service, Marcus and Elena attended to see their work in person. More than 200 people gathered in the cemetery as snow began to fall, each holding a small candle. The choir sang Silent Night and Amazing Grace while names of the deceased were read aloud. Marcus recognized dozens of people wearing items he'd worked on, but more importantly, he saw families standing together with dignity, warmly dressed against the winter cold, able to focus on remembering their loved ones instead of worrying about their appearance. In January, Marcus was organizing receipts for tax preparation when he realized something remarkable. Despite charging below market rates for many services and doing significant pro bono work, the shop was profitable. More than profitable, it was thriving. Look at this, he told Elena, showing her the year-end summary. We did more business in our first 3 months than most tailoring shops do in 6. And it's not just funeral-related work anymore. We're getting regular alterations, custom suits, even some bridal work. Elena studied the numbers. People trust us. When you help someone at their most difficult moment, they remember that. They tell their friends. Marcus realized she was right. Dorothy Hartwell had sent her daughter for dress alterations. Father Santos had referred 3 other clergy members who needed vestments adjusted. Rebecca Martinez had brought her entire extended family for various alterations before her cousin's wedding. But beyond the business success, Marcus found something he hadn't expected: purpose. Each day brought opportunities to help people present their best selves during life's most significant moments. Whether preparing for a funeral, a memorial service, or simply visiting a loved one's grave, his customers trusted him with their most vulnerable moments. On a warm April morning, exactly 7 months after opening, Marcus was pressing a wedding dress when Dorothy Hartwell walked through the door. She looked different, healthier, with color in her cheeks and a lightness in her step. Mr. Chen. I hope you remember me. Of course, Mrs. Hartwell. How are you doing? Much better, thank you. I wanted to tell you something. After Harold's service, I felt so lost. But wearing that dress, feeling put together and dignified, it gave me strength I didn't know I had. It helped me get through the hardest day of my life. She paused, reaching into her purse. I've been volunteering at the grief support group at the church, and I tell everyone about you. About how you understand that sometimes the smallest kindness can make the biggest difference. She pulled out an envelope. I wanted to give you this. Inside was a handwritten note from the grief support group, signed by 23 people, thanking Marcus for his compassion and skill. But more than that, it was an acknowledgement of something Marcus was still learning to understand about his work. You know, Dorothy continued, Harold used to say that some people are called to heal bodies, some to heal souls, but the rare ones heal dignity. That's what you do here. As Marcus locked up the shop that evening, he looked across the street at the cemetery where the setting sun cast long shadows between the headstones. He thought about Elena's original question: why would anyone want to open a business next to a graveyard? Now he knew the answer. He'd opened his shop next to a cemetery because that's where people came to remember what mattered most. Where they came to honor love, sacrifice, memory, and legacy. Where they needed to feel worthy of the moment, worthy of their grief, worthy of their respect for those who had gone before. In his tailoring shop beside the graves, Marcus had found his calling. He wasn't just altering clothes, he was helping people face life's most profound moments with dignity, strength, and grace. The brass bell chimed one last time as he locked the door, and Marcuston walked home to his wife, knowing that tomorrow would bring new opportunities to serve his community in ways he was still discovering. Some businesses, he had learned, weren't just about profit. Some were about purpose. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, you found a place where both could flourish together, even next to a cemetery.